First of all, I would like to say I'm honored to be able to come before you kids and tell you what I remember 64 years ago almost about World War II and what happened during that terrible time. You have to understand that I was, believe it or not, I was once as young as you were. I never had hair like him, but I did have hair, okay? I wish I had it now, man, I'll tell you right now. But, so I want to just kind of back up a little bit and tell you, no, I can remember Linden when I was a kid. So I was born and raised in Stockton. And just coming to Linden in those days with my mom and dad taking a ride was a great thrill. And I hope you know how lucky you are to be living in a wonderful town or as Linden. It's just great. I was born in Stockton, and my family came to the United States from Russia in 1901. Just a little background. My grandfather, on both sides, my paternal and maternal. My paternal grandfather came from Russia in 1901, started a furniture store in Stockton, California in 1906. That's the day of the great earthquake in San Francisco, if you ever heard about that. And at that time, he and another person associated took a barge to San Francisco and picked up used furniture that was left over from the earthquake and brought it back to Stockton, opened up a furniture store on San Joaquin in Washington, which lasted for 72 years. During that particular time, he had 6 sons, and all of them were in the furniture business. My father happened to be the oldest son. What I want to tell you initially is that I'm born and raised as an American Jew. That's what I am. I'm an American Jew. All the years that I have lived in the United States, I have never personally been a victim of anti-Semitism. That means I hate the Jew. I know there is anti-Semitism, but however, I have been very fortunate to live in this part of the country which Stockton never had to face it. It was here. The fact is, in my early days, I was a very good musician. I played piano. I still am a good musician. I used to play dances. I used to play a lot of dances for fraternities, sororities, never knowing that if I wanted to join one of them, I couldn't have because I was a Jew. But it was never flaunted. I never knew, and I never knew because I never tried to join because I was just involved in music. I learned this many years later. In any event, 1941 came along. Prior to 1941, there was the war going on. But it was in Europe and in China, where the Japanese had tried to take over, make their influence felt in the Chinese area in Manchuria. We in the United States knew that there was a war going on. Remember, there was no television. There was the radio and the newspaper. And that's where we would get our information from, and from our parents. And finally, on December 7th, 1941, and I can remember that day so vividly because I actually had been rehearsing playing piano for a wedding. And the news came through 10 o'clock in the morning that Pearl Harbor, that's in Hawaii, kids, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, we call it an ambush today. We were Pearl Harbored. No one knew it was coming. Pearl Harbor and the Pacific Islands were bombed, and we lost thousands and thousands of young people. Some of them were still laying in the bottom of the bay in Honolulu. I think you may or may not have heard of the Arizona, which is the memorial in Honolulu in the ocean laying there with over 1,000, 1,400 young guys still laying there to this very day. But didn't mean much that meant to me. I was 16 years old at the time, having one wonderful time involved in my own life, involved in my own music, never realizing that within 2 years, I'd be in the Army and not come home for 2.5 years. What happened during this period of time, we heard some rumbles about the Jews being persecuted by a madman named Adolf Hitler, who was very similar to a nut in Iran today named Mohammedjad, who to this moment states there was never what they call a Holocaust. Now, I want to define a Holocaust to you so you understand what I'm talking about. A Holocaust at that time was the killing and massacre of Jews, Catholics, gypsies, homosexuals, anyone who did not meet the description of what Adolf Hitler felt was the super race. Blonde, blue eyes, you'd be safe. But those who were not to his image, and he had a part of these people, you were killed, you were murdered, you were destroyed. And I'm not saying it enough, you were murdered. I can visualize this village here of Linden, of the troops coming in here, and you're having a wonderful time with your family on the farms, and these troops coming in and killing your families, and you don't even know what's going on. In any event, these people were coming in to Stockton, some of the refugees, telling us some of the stories that was happening, and not many people paid attention to it. You were either blind to it, or didn't believe it, didn't want to hear it, or you couldn't visualize what was happening. My mom and dad, I never heard talking too much about it, what was going on. So blindly, we went on with our lives, and then came along, I got into service. And in those days, for your edification, guys, all the fellas wanted to get into service. And there were ladies in the service too at that time, but at that time it was male dominated. And you wanted to go. You didn't want to stay home because we were fighting tyrants. At that time, it was Adolf Hitler in Germany and Tojo in Japan. In November of '43, my notice came in. I couldn't get in before I tried, but my eyes would not allow me to be taken at that time. But I was waiting to get my draft notice. Oh, how I was waiting to get it. After I got it, after a while I was sorry I got it, but I got it. Now you have to remember, at that time, I don't even know what discrimination is. I swear to God, I didn't know what discrimination is. And where the first camp I am sent to is in Mississippi. Camp Shelby, Mississippi. It was near a place called Hattiesburg. And that's my first introduction at 18 years old to what blacks were going through at that particular time. That's where I first saw the latrines, the bathrooms, black and white, water fountains, black and white. A black couldn't go here, a black couldn't go there. You couldn't get on the bus. If you got on the bus, you were in the back. And this was all new to me, startling to me, disgusting to me. You couldn't say too much because the same time of the group I was in, it was from the Middle West. I was not too popular either, and not really realizing it at the time that I was a Jew. I had never faced it before. I never knew that because I was a Jew, I was different. I didn't have any horns on my head, but I was different. I can remember a guy from Indiana knocking me on my butt for no reason because I was a Jew. But I have to say this, my fellow soldiers did come to my aid, and I think the reason they came to my aid was my mother and dad saved my life. You know why? Every Tuesday, there would be a big box coming in by railroad of food. My mom and dad used to pack this big box of food with salami, rye bread, cookies, banana cakes, and they would come to this camp, a box this big. I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. And when the box first came, I used to have to go pick it up myself at headquarters and bring it into my barracks, put it down there, open it up, and then kind of anybody wanted some food, Later on, I didn't have to pick it up anymore because it was brought to my bunk, put down, not opened up yet. Pretty soon, it was opened up. Everybody would take what they wanted, and I was a great guy at that time. And no one touched me anymore. And I've always thanked my mom and dad for that. Now, I'm in Mississippi. I'm in the 65th Division. That was attached to Patton's Third Army. I go overseas in November of 1944. We land in France. And that's where we started from France all through the war till it ended in April 1945. I ended up in a place called Linz, Austria. Linz, L-I-N-Z, Austria. I was with the 868 Field Artillery Battalion, headquarters battery, which was in communications. And what I did was I was a wireman. And what you did, they had what they called forward observers that went out with the field artillery, and they observed where the artillery was going to be shooting. And then you had wires attached. They had telephones there, back to headquarters battery, which you had to keep intact. And if they were cut by shrapnel, you had to go out there, and they called it splicing. But here I was, an 18-year-old guy who used to play the piano, I used to look at my fingers all cut up and say, what the hell am I doing here, But in any event, I made through it. Going from France through Europe, never heard of these concentration camps, never heard of anything about it. The only thing that kind of rang a bell with me was we'd be going through some towns or some villages. Some people would say, "Du bist ein jüdischer Soldat, du bist ein jüdischer Soldat." They would spot me and ask, "Are you a Jewish soldier?" I wondered why they would ask me that. And I knew afterwards, after I began to learn a little bit more, they thought there would be some type of Jews that would just kill them because they were Jewish soldiers for what they were doing to the Jews. I really, at that point, believe it or not, I still didn't know the extent of what was happening. My main purpose of being here this morning, and I thank you so much for inviting me, is that not to forget what can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. These Jews in Germany were as German as anybody could be. They were as American as anybody could be. I'm an American Jew. So I'm as American as anybody in this room. And that's how they felt. But they were murdered. 6 million Jews. 6 million. Can you conceive of that? No. I'm telling you the truth. Besides the Jews, like I said, there were Catholics, the priests who came to their aid. There were the gypsies were dogs. They killed gypsies. They killed anybody who Hitler thought was not of the Aryan race. My point being here, you're living wonderful. You're living, and I hope to God every day of your life is as happy as it is right now. But it could happen again. And that's what I'm standing here telling you, because what happened was on April 9th, 1945. And I have pictures here which I am inviting you kids to come up afterwards and to look at. We're traveling in Bavaria in the Thuringen Forest, Thurigen, which was 30 miles southwest of Weimar, Germany, Weimar. And as we're coming there, we come to a wooded area, a forest. And as we're approaching this, and keep in mind that I'm 19 years old at that time, there was a sentinel box sitting there on the road, dirt road, with a body laying there, who turned out to be a German SS soldier. The SS were the drugs of the murderers, the worst murderers of the German army. And he is dead. We didn't know what happened, how he was killed at that time, until we went a little further, and then we saw barbed wire. Barbed wire. And in the back of this barbed wire, we came to this camp. It was called Ordruf, O-R-D-R-U-F, which was the very first concentration camp ever discovered by the Allied forces. You probably never heard of it before. It was called the Forgotten Camp. Why? At the same time, our great president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had died, and the press were focused on Franklin D. Roosevelt's death. That is the camp that if you kids ever watch television or you ever in the movies where you see General Patton, who was a great warrior, Eisenhower, who was the supreme commander of the Allied forces, who became president of the United States, General Bradley, that's the first camp that they were called to observe what man could do to man. I'm told, I didn't see this happen, that General Patton, who was as tough as nails, actually cried and vomited what he saw from what he observed and what he smelled. When you walked into that camp, the first thing you saw was a gallows, and you'll see it right there, my picture, with a board that would hit you about right here. And I was told by the inmates that the Germans used that to put a person over that, take a board and break their backs. Then you would go a little further and you saw bodies laying in the yard. Emaciated, skeletal bodies of people who were still warm that had just been shot by German troops who were made aware of the fact that the Americans were coming and had taken hundreds and taken them into woods somewhere to kill them. But these people were still there. The Americans were getting closer. So they shot as many as they could in the head. And you'll see their bodies laying there. As we went further, we saw these people who were still alive, living death, skeletons, dirty, rotten, stinking people. And you'll see there are people laying there that they are as thin as your leg, man. Just as thin as your leg. I'm not joking. You'll see them laying here if you ever look at these pictures. As we went in further into camps, we saw crematoriums with legs and arms, skeletons where they had burned them. We saw barbecue pits. These pictures will show you where they had taken the iron railings and burned these bodies, trying to destroy them. We saw rooms not as high as this ceiling here, but half the size of this, half as high, with bodies stacked like flour sacks covered with lime, where they did that to try to keep down the smell. We saw people milling around not knowing what's going on, who were just crying and yelling and screaming out of joy and of agony that we were there to help them. Keep in mind, directly across from this camp, from where we're sitting right now, for example, right across to the next building you will see back of you, there was a village of hundreds of people who were there and knew what was going on, but they swore they didn't know what was going on. However, when our commanders digested the atrocities, what had happened there, and were able to finally control themselves too, they sent for the next day troops across to this village, gathered all the inhabitants, led by their mayor, brought them to this camp, made them walk around, made them help clean up the bodies, and you'll see pictures of them cleaning up these bodies, and help bury them. I was told that the mayor, they called him the Burgermeister at that time, committed suicide the next day. And I don't know if that ever happened, but that's the story we heard. The people in the camp would tell us what happened. And I was able to converse a little bit with them because many of them spoke Yiddish, that means Jewish. And I spoke Jewish at that time and could understand it. And most of them, the majority of them were from Russia, were from Poland, and from France. And I'm told, and we were told, that 15,000 people were massacred in this camp, that one camp. 15,000. You say, oh, baloney. I'm telling you, when there's 6 million destroyed, 15,000 was a pimple. A pimple. In any event, what happened next? I'm a kid. I'm looking at this, and I can't remember exactly what was feeling in my heart. Well, I know what happened to me today. When I talk about it today, and I had to be 10 times worse then. I cry inside of me. I cry inside of me because I hear to this very day that this never happened. On May 8th, as late as May 8th of this year, May 8th of 2008, Mohammedjad from Iran, the president, stated, that was on the 60th anniversary of Israel's anniversary, State of Israel. He said, this never happened, the Holocaust never happened, and we're going to be killing all the people in Israel. We're going to kill them all. You have to understand a very important thing. You have to correlate this right now with what's going on in Gaza, on the Gaza Strip in the Mideast right now. That the grandchildren of these people who escaped to Israel are the ones who are fighting this particular war now. It's hard to conceive. 64, 65 years have gone by, and they're still fighting for their lives. Because what happened, I'm going to sit down. The old man has to sit down for a minute. What happened, when these people were released, where were they going to go? Where were they going to go? They had no place to go. Their families were destroyed. The children had no mom and daddy to go to. The mom and daddy didn't have their parents to go to. Where were they going to go? So what happened, there was other camps opened up by the Allies, which were called DP camps, displaced person camps. And what this meant was that these people were displaced people, displaced persons. They still were in camps, no barbed wire, okay? They were fed, they were treated like human beings, but they had no place to go. Think about it. Where were they going to go? They couldn't go in Germany, their families were wiped out. In Poland, the families were wiped out. In France, the families were wiped out. Where were they going to go? And so at that time is when certain groups that were already living in Israel sent to try to save them there, to get them out of the camps. And they had a heck of a time getting them from the camps to somewhere they could go to survive. And so they've been fighting. I'm not here to politicize today, but they've been fighting for their lives ever since. My main point from being here is that I just want you to know that we live in the greatest country in the world. The greatest country in the world, and I don't care what anyone says about Bush, that he was not a good president, blah, blah, blah. We live in the greatest country in the world. We're not perfect people, but there isn't one country that I can think can give to the people how the people of the United States have given to each other and to the world. We are the best nation in the world. Never forget it. You want to criticize? That's okay. That's what democracy is all about. But never put down your leaders. When I saw on the television this guy throwing boots at President Bush, And people were laughing about it afterwards. I was incensed. You know why? He wasn't just throwing boots at Bush. He was throwing boots at 4,000 kids who had already died over there fighting for democracy. He was throwing boots at the United States and laughing at him. And people said, oh, fun. I'm sorry they didn't hit Bush. Don't ever be like that, kids. I beg you. I beg you, don't ever be like that. You want to criticize, that's okay. But never be ungrateful for what our leaders have done for us. They're doing, I'm not saying doing everything right, but it's still the best place in the world. This can happen anywhere. It's happened in Africa. We have a genocide in Africa, which is horrible. Wherever it is, it's horrible. I happen to be talking just about the Holocaust, what happened in Germany, because, as you could say, I was there. I saw it. I lived it. I was as close to these people as I am to you right now. I smelled them. I touched them. I cried with them. And now I'm ready for any questions you want to throw at me. And I thank you for being so wonderful, just listening to me. You might think I'm a little bit theatrical. I don't mean to be. I'm talking from my heart. I'm 84 years old now. And I know what life can be. And I know how lucky I am living in this country. And I thank you for your attention, kids. Do I have post-traumatic stress, you're asking? No, I don't have PTS, but do I think about it? There isn't a day, honey, that I don't. When I was just thinking about this morning, laying in bed thinking about it, I'm going to tell you something. I'm very lucky today. You know why? I didn't cry. Generally, when I give these speeches, I cry. I don't know why I didn't cry today, but I'm glad I didn't. But that's how it tears my heart out, to answer your question. There were hundreds all over. They called them work camps, concentration camps, and the ones we mainly heard about, of course, was Auschwitz. We've all heard of Auschwitz, which was in Poland. That's the one we've heard about so much. We've heard about Mulhausen. Incidentally, Auschwitz, it was in Poland, and the people in Poland were miserable to the Jews. There's this great movie out right now called Defiance. You just saw it last week, which was a great movie, but it shows, and it's a true story. It shows what happened, how a villagers is living in a town as nice as this, happy as hell, you know. Hello, everybody had fun. All of a sudden, these guys come in, and they killed them. That's the only one. Fact is, I'm glad you asked that question too. After I came home, I was never able to look at any, besides these pictures here, I was never able to look at anything on television, in the movies, for years, until there was a movie called Schindler's List. And that was a story about this German who saved so many Jews because he put them to work in a factory. And the list he had, if you were on that list, you lived. But my wife Shirley wanted to see it. So I decided I would see it, and I was very happy. I saw the movie because it was a great movie. But after that, no more. I won't watch any movies. I can't do it, son. I just can't do it. I want to tell you, hon, I honestly can't remember. It was 64 years ago. It wasn't a long time. It wasn't more. In my guess, I'm guessing right now, a guesstimate, maybe 4 or 5 hours. Then we moved on. The war was moving. The war was moving. So it could have been more, it could have been less. But if I would tell you how long, it's been a long, long time. And those things I have gone away. But what is vivid is what I invite you. I'm glad you mentioned that too. say if you even forget these things, to look at these pictures, and these were taken the very same day I was there by a buddy of mine who was a medic, and he sent me, gave me a set of these pictures. So what you're seeing is and on the back of these pictures, I had written notes to my father about what I saw and what I thought, and I said, I hope you can send these stock and record. Maybe they'll publish it. Well, to make a long story short, they didn't publish it, and maybe they had their own reasons, but